Welcome back, everybody. So it's been about a week since I did my B-17 review. It's been 2 weeks since release, and as mentioned during the previous video, they were on a 2-week update schedule, which means this week there was an actual update, which is nice. Now, the update itself is going from version 0.9 to version 0.9.1. The update itself being called Seattle. I'm going to presume that's in reference to the bulk of B-17s being built at the Boeing factory in Seattle. Now, the updates they have are kind of threefold. The first is improvements. They have improved flight dynamics, ground handling, fuel system, engine behavior, camera views, and electrical system. I will touch on 2 of those later. And there were fixes for level of detail, missing animations, missing textures, and missing 3D objects. And the last one is they added comms via the ATC panel. We can go ahead and take a look, but the first thing I'll point out for you is missing textures. Now, during the last review, for example, for every skin except just the boring green, all of the textures for the engine nacelles were missing and everything. Some had multiple missing textures, including wing textures. All of them work. So that's fantastic news. One thing I'll also point out is that lighting. There's a big old light. Lighting does not work. Now, granted, they did not promise or say that it was fixed in this update. But I just wanted to highlight that lighting still does not work at this time. So we can go ahead and get started. Let's get the engines going. Now, another thing to point out, again, nothing was noted in the update, so don't expect it to be here, but when it comes to the cockpit itself, it's still in the same state as it was before. Checklist doesn't work, nothing is clickable. It's just a cockpit. You can only use the levers. They are not labeled either. But again, that wasn't promised in the update, so don't expect it at this point in time. They did say they added comms. Let's tune ground and do a departure request.
Tips 1-1IT_ Delta November Romeo 158 with Kilo. Request taxi for takeoff. Departing straight out.
Tips 1-1IT_ Delta November Romeo 158. Taxi to and hold short of runway 17 via taxiway Charlie. Contact tower on 118.1 when ready.
Taxi to and hold short runway 17 via taxiway Charlie. Tips 1-1IT_ Delta November Romeo 158.
They did note they had improved, we're just going to clip right through that plane, that's fine, that they had improved ground handling. I've seen some improvement. There's still room for improvement. The engine kind of struggles from a complete stop to get going. You have to really give it the beans, and then it just really shoots forward, which is a little jarring. Maybe you did that in real life too, but I feel like they overshot it a little bit. The upside is the tail does actually move a lot more flexibly, and promise I'm not going to tip it over. The tail does move a lot better, so kudos for that. You can actually turn without needing, about the size of a battleship's turn radius. As far as the sound goes, again, I do want to point out, I set the volume when recording to about 0.7. of actual volume, which means that it might sound very quiet to you, but otherwise I would literally have to yell over the engines. I do hear them at full volume though. And we're gonna go ahead and request takeoff.
Entebbe Tower, dips 1-1 IT underscore in Delta November Romeo 158. Ready for straight out departure at runway 17.
Dips 1-1 IT underscore in Delta November Romeo 158. QNH 1015 departing straight out approved. Cleared for takeoff runway 17.
I will say that the sound
For takeoff runway 17.
in the cockpit is very nice.
In Delta November Romeo 158.
The sound in... Oh, we did a little Tokyo drift there. The sound in the cockpit is very nice. The sound outside from the engines is not... I don't want to call it a whooshing sound, but... it sounds relatively quiet. Like right now I'm at full throttle, full RPM, and the sound actually went quieter going down the runway. Whereas in the cockpit it's nice and consistent. And we are off the ground. Let's go ahead and get the gear up. So the next big point for this is we went over ground handling. I do think engine behavior is another one that has significantly improved. The engines respond better and less like a fighter jet. So more like you would a bomber to expect a bomber to behave. Camera views. I'm not super satisfied with the camera view from the rear at this point. It's like we're way too close to the tail. For a plane this size, you kind of want to be at least a little bit further back. But the default view is not great. Camera view for the cockpit is fantastic. Like, keep that the way it is. That's perfect. I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit off the RPMs out of the engine, because we're just going to loop around the airport and see if we can land without crashing or crash without landing. Improved flight dynamics. I have noticed a fairly massive improvement there. One of the odd behaviors it did with the initial release, at least for me, was try to jerk the nose up almost immediately after takeoff and just stall itself out. It is a lot smoother now. It is a lot more controlled and expected behavior. It's hard to describe, but when I say it flies more like you would expect a bomber to fly rather than a fighter jet, is the best description I can give you. We'll drop the gear down, and we'll go ahead and put our flaps down. Now here's one behavior I have noticed. Landing with the initial release was very easy because the engine behavior was so abrupt that you could just land it on a dime. Now I've noticed they may have, I wouldn't say overshot it a little bit, but if you have your flap set to 10 degrees, and you try to do a normal approach on the runway, you are going to need all of that runway to land. I found that I get the best behavior if I just put the flaps fully down, and reading up on it, that should really be for like a short runway landing. But I found that that is the most comfortable way to land it. We are just northwest of the airport. Now, last time I pointed out that you could see the ground through that rear gunner, rear top gunner's glass. You can still see that. So that hasn't changed. And again, some of these things I'm highlighting are things that they have not mentioned fixing, so I also would not have expected them to do so. You can see with the flaps down, it now creates an enormous amount of drag as well.
1-1IT_ and Delta November Romeo 158. Leaving my airspace. Frequency change approved.
Entebbe Tower, dips 1-1
You can see that reflected in our speed.
Romeo 158. Frequency change.
We're gonna go ahead and connect to Entebbe. To tower, full stop landing.
Entebbe Tower, dips 1-1 IT_.
We're gonna go ahead and start turning. Now we're at full speed, but because the flaps are all the way down, we are just barely at moving speed. If we lose any more speed, we'll basically fall out of the sky. But this is kind of expected behavior. I will say, most of my criticism from last time I will take back. They delivered an update on time, they made actual improvements, like it's fantastic. So, kudos for that. Which does leave my main criticism. Is it worth $33 today? It most certainly is not. Will it be worth $33 or $40 on release if they stay on schedule? Absolutely. It's going to be one of the few World War II era bombers that is well done, has the right, flight behavior, has the right model, just looks fantastic. Overall, if I had to rate this update, yeah, I would rate it very highly. They did a fantastic job with the things they improved, but there are still things that need to be added, updated, improved, and I am very excited to see, once lighting is added in, once the cockpit is actually completed, and I can press all the buttons, the checklist works, and everything is just the way it should be. So as we go on like you can see the runway in front of us, the speed is the second dial from the left in the center console, basically centered between the 4 red balls that you can see, for lack of a better word. This is about as much speed as we can drop before we start falling out of the sky, with our flaps fully out. Now, last time I did have issues reaching higher altitudes. I did do a test run with that. I won't repeat that because it takes like a good amount of time. But with the improved flight dynamics, I am getting a much better result there as well. So overall, like I said, positive improvements. The engines make a lot of noise. I have barely moved the throttle though. We're just gonna go ahead and dump it down. It will immediately, you see the jerky behavior? It will immediately do that. Even though I'm very gentle on the throttle. While I put the parking brake on. That was a very short landing, so with flaps fully extended, like, you do get the landing that you ask for. We'll go ahead and leave the runway. Yeah, it can be a little bit jerky, and I've had that a couple of times because I've practiced a few.
Delta November Romeo 158. Contact ground on 121.9er.
There we go. Ground handoff.
121.9er. Dips 1-1 IT underscore and Delta November Romeo 158.
Okay. So I have tried a couple of takeoffs and landings. I will say it is a struggle bug if you land appropriately with 10 degrees worth of flaps and try to put it down. If you look at Entebbe, this is a long runway. You will need a lot of that runway. Getting enough of your speed out is a little on the difficult side. Doing it with flaps fully extended, which is really designed for those short field landings, that works. That's perfect. That's fantastic. But overall, like I said before, I'll repeat it again, I am very happy with this update. I feel like the improvements are there and showing. I'm very excited for this to actually be fully completed, have everything working, and at that time I would probably say it is worth the money to buy it. But as of today, I would say probably hold off because you are still beta testing. So just hold on, hang around, and in 2 weeks hopefully we'll have another update, and we'll do another short flight to see what changed, what got better, what got worse, and go from there. And then hopefully around, there should be 3 more updates at 2 weeks. That is middle of December. The airplane should be fully complete and its V1 version should be out. So stick with me as we get there, but thanks for hanging around, and I'll see you guys at the next update.